Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm Laura Oswald, Director of Marketing at the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you for joining us today. On Tourism Talk, we are so honored to get to share the stories of visiting artists from all over the world and our local artists who are taking Paducah's creativity worldwide. Today, we have a very special artist here, Mitch Kimball. He is not only a local artist, he is also an arts educator, and he recently took his talents to Jingdezhen, China, one of our fellow UNESCO Creative Cities, for the pottery workshop. Welcome, Mitch. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have so much to talk about, so much to share, and we even have some examples of your work and what you did in China. But before we get started, please tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in Paducah, your family, your work as an artist and as an educator.
Sure, that's a lot to cover. So let's see, I am from Louisiana, and I grew up in Bayou Bartholomew in northern Louisiana, and I went to college at the Southern Mississippi University of Southern Miss, and that's where I met my wife, Shan Stamper, and she is also a metalsmith and a local high school art teacher right next door to me. And my daughter, Ren Kimball, which is also a young budding artist too. We're a family of makers, and I am a potter, naturally, and I like to make functional artworks that people can use all the time. So I'm a wood fire potter. I like to harvest trees and use that to fire my kiln with. And so each tree kind of gives pots different colors. So I'm always experimenting with different types of woods, kind of like cooking.
That's awesome. And people may know your work and your unique style by seeing it around town. Where might people know you from?
Well, let's see. Currently, we have work at the Yeiser Art Center, which is a dear home to us. And you can find things online as well through Facebook or through our website at snmstudios.com.
Very good. We'll make sure everyone gets that. Definitely check out their website and you'll see Mitch's work as well as Shan's beautiful metal work. But today we are going to focus on the ceramics.
Sure.
And this awesome experience that you've just had in Jingdezhen, China. And you knew about Jingdezhen long before Paducah was connected with them through the Creative Cities Network back in Mississippi.
That's true. In my undergrad at USM, there was a group of students that would come by and let us know about other opportunities that you could do during the summers. And one of them was going with West Virginia University to a small town in China called Jingdezhen, China. And so they would take students there, and they worked with a place called the Pottery Workshop, which was an amazing facility and amazing connection for students to get out of their normal routine and to go find out where in the world does porcelain come from, and to work with clay and to work with artisans all the way across the world in a different environment. So you learn so much.
Yes, and I think that how you just summed that up is exactly what you did and experienced in getting to participate in this several years later after
Yes.
you found out about it. What made you think that this was the right time for you to do this program?
I guess in my timing, I have my own studio now, I have my own house, and I have my own business, and it was just like it was time to grow. And so there seems to be a time for everything. So when Mary let me know that they were looking for a potter from Lower Town or from Paducah to get to go to Jingdezhen, of course I was like, yeah, I would love to go. I've always wanted to go. And so I applied and then was immediately accepted, which I was just so excited about.
Yes.
And then we started, thank you. And then we started planning, like, how can we make that be a possible adventure for me to go on. And so we started having benefit dinners,
Yes.
which were tons of fun just to put on. My wife, Shan, she loves to have parties and she loves to event coordinate. So this was right up her alley. So she knew exactly what to do. So we started making artwork, planning for the events, putting out postcards. And then we wanted to share one of our loves is to make artwork useful.
Yeah.
You know, we always think that food tastes better from handmade dishes.
I can verify that after attending your dinner.
So we were like, well, how many dinners should we have? And we had one, and then that was really, really successful. It's like, well, let's do another one. We'll plan two. And that one also was very, very successful. And we had two different types of meals. And of course, there were tons of people that helped pull off that event. But it was really fun to collaborate with local chefs,
Yes.
Restaurants, other entrepreneurs, and of course tons of friends, just to have a really good dinner and a good event. And then they were all very curious about my adventure too. So I'd never been to China, so they always like, well, how do you prepare to go to a place? Can you speak the language? And I was like, no,
Yeah.
I can say a couple of things. And then, which was really nice, they had been, and they were like, well, you should try this app. This one works really well. This might help you translate. And, you know, one thing led to another, so it was good to collaborate with other people and get that information and feedback before I went.
Absolutely, and I think that having been part of one of those, an attendee at one of those events, it was so special just to share that experience with you and your enthusiasm for being part of this program, and not only being part of it personally, but representing Paducah and sharing where you were going with the rest of us here. And so I certainly hope that we'll see more dinners like that do kind of connect that usefulness and that purpose of your vessels that you're creating. We'll show some of those vessels and photos from the events. But I think that may be in the future some opportunities being Shand.
Definitely so. We enjoyed it a lot, and that's one thing that I like doing, is making things for people to use. You know, functional work is what I like to do, and I like to make custom work as well. But this is a special event, so it was really fun to get to do it. And each of the dishes were made specifically for what the chef was preparing. So I get to learn how to make those things, and they get to use my dishes as well.
What would an example of that be? I'm thinking back on our dinner and several of the courses. What would be your best example of that?
Let's see. Making the large bowls was that was very fun. Working with the new glaze, which we wanted to do something that was white, that would show off all the food that was prepared inside there. And we made a noodle bowl dinner, which was our first dinner, and it was just an event to where we could go and get certain ingredients for the noodle bowls to make it as authentic as possible. And we had two chefs kind of help work on that as well, so that was really nice.
I think that's something that maybe we don't think about as consumers and diners, thinking about that purpose and the beauty of how a dish or a vessel. I know your wine glasses are another beautiful signature piece of yours that really show off and make that a beautiful experience to eat and drink.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's just fun. We've always enjoyed having dinner parties, and so it's nice when people come to our house. They want to see what's in our cupboards, and so it's nice to put out everything so everyone can see. And no two things are alike, which is really part of my motto. They're very similar, or what I say, they're cousins in clay, but they are definitely not identical. So my wood kiln, when you put things in there, depending on where it is in the kiln and how close it is, proximity to the fire, will change each individual piece. So no matter how hard I try, I can never make two alike, which some people, they want things to look very similar, and I can do that, but I can't make them look perfectly the same.
I think that our viewers will see that an event, an experience with you is very eye-opening and a learning experience. So please do keep us posted on any future events. And S&M Studios on Facebook, I would assume that that's a good place to get connected.
That's perfect.
Great, great. Well, so that was prior to the China journey, and then the journey happened. So tell us about this month-long residency that you embarked upon.
Well, let's see. The first thing we had to do was make sure all of our paperwork was taken care of. We flew into Shanghai, and I met one of my dear friends, and he is an educator there as well. So he was my liaison to help me facilitate going through the airport. And he had a driver waiting for me, which was so exciting. Had my name and everything, and got off the airplane because everything was in Mandarin or Chinese, and I was like, I don't know where I'm going. This is so nervous and exciting at the same time. It's like, I can figure it out. But it was nice that my name was right there.
Yes.
So we got in the car, and then we took off, and he took me to his school, and he teaches English as a second language to all these other students. So the first thing I got to do when I got to Shanghai was to get to go see another school and what that's like. Wow. And it's just real amazing. Their schools are so similar to ours. They're a little bit smaller, and all the children are from different places, like multilingual students. They would know 6 to 8 different languages. And I was like, how do you communicate with your students? He says, I just speak English. And I'm like, wow. He says, yeah, it's an immersion school, so they must learn the language in order to succeed. And it was amazing. So that was my first stop.
Yes, perfect first stop.
I know, it was perfect. We went out to dinner. It was amazing. And then I got on a train, and then I took a train to Jingdezhen. So when I got to Jingdezhen, one of our UNESCO friends, James Chin, picked me up at the airport, or at the train station there, and then he had my name too. So I recognized his face, and so we got into the car, and then it was late at this point, almost midnight. So we're driving through the countryside, you know, at dark. I'm just oogling on all the things that I could possibly see. And then we finally get to the pottery workshop, and then he lets me out of the car, and then I walk a few hundred feet, and there's my room. It was really awesome. So easy to navigate.
It sounds like just amazing to be so out of your ordinary environment, and just immediately you're kind of engaged and immersed.
Yeah, it's like your senses turn on, and then you go into overdrive, like, how can I navigate? What's the best place? And so I got there, got great rest that evening, and I woke up so giddy the next morning at like 5 o'clock, you know, because my schedule has changed a little bit. And I was like, oh, I want to go get a cup of coffee, and then I'll start my day. So went to try to find coffee that morning, and shops do not open until 9 o'clock. So there was no coffee until 9 o'clock. But I did get to see a lot of the local area. I found a beautiful garden. There were tons and tons of shops everywhere. They were setting up for a pottery workshop. Wow. So there were a whole bunch of artisans setting up their tents for that morning. So it was really neat to see the whole town come to life early morning. That was not expected, but it was really cool. There's lots of street vendors, tons of really good food, lots of smells, lots of sounds too. So everyone's honking, and it's a very busy, active place. And I was not expecting it to be so lively, but it was very, very cool.
And it is a place that is built on porcelain and of porcelain. I know, I think the surroundings, you have some great photos that show that off. Tell us a little bit about how porcelain is engaged into the city.
Well, the town was built around porcelain. The emperor of the time decided that he wanted all of his dishes made from this town. And he said these were the best utilitarian style dishes, and so he would ask all the potters to make certain things for him, and they would make hundreds of them, and he selected one. Wow. All the others were simply smashed. So there's shards all over the place. It's covered in the roads, the sidewalks, anything that didn't make it. You can just dig down in the ground and just find shards. It's like archaeological dream, you know, in a lot of ways. And so we went to a couple of antique markets, and they have all the shards laid out. There's a place called the Shard Market. So you can go and find different shards from different dynasties, and, you know, what didn't make the cut. And you can see, like, it was a really good example. Or maybe there was a small little imperfection. That was the one thing that the emperor did not like. So it's neat to see clay everywhere. And like I said, there's artisans that were setting up on the market, and you walk through the town, there's like a bamboo brush maker. There is a master mold maker. There's a kiln guy or a kiln woman. And so they were all making what they had been doing for years. Like, I'm assuming in their family, if you were a brush maker, then your father was a brush maker, and his father before him was a brush maker, or possibly mother. And it's really neat to see that their sense of tradition just keeps going on.
Absolutely.
And I always wondered, like, well, what if you wanted to break tradition? What would that be like, you know, for you? You know, as a teacher, it seems like our students kind of want to follow their parents' footsteps. So for them, it seemed like it was very, very traditional to follow footsteps.
Well, what a place to be and be learning. I can imagine that every day was a new adventure and a new experience. What was that day-to-day like for you, creating, just being immersed there?
Every day, you would wake up about 5:30. It seems like I would wake up and then go to the studio. It's the first thing to do. Wedge up your clay, get ready. You had to make a list like, what do you want to do for this day? And try to use your time wisely, because breakfast would come. And so you would leave to go have breakfast. Then lunch would come. Then you would leave to go have lunch. And then you would come back to studio. And then there was dinner. So we did not have to worry about cooking or any of those day-to-day things. It was just you could work in a studio until you were ready to eat.
Wow.
And we had a chef that would prepare food from us that was all local. So each day he would go out to the markets, choose everything for that day's dinner. And it was neat to have dinner with all these other artists from all over the world. We had folks from the Netherlands, we had folks from Spain, we had folks from Newfoundland, Canada. It was just an exciting group of students that were all there. And I call them students. You know, they were professionals too, that they come there, they're just there to make. And they find artisans that will either copy their work so they can mass produce it for other companies, or they're just there for personal time like me, like, what do I want to make with a different type of clay? And so since porcelain's been in this town for a long, long time, it was something I'm not used to working with.
Right.
So you get to learn from them. So you can either go to their studio and they'll teach you, like, this is how I center clay, or this is how I pull up work, or this is how I pull pots off of a hump. Or they would come to you in your studio and they would throw for you right there. So it was very beneficial to learn from masters. Of course, stubborn Southern me, I'm like, I have been doing this for 20 years. I know how to do it. And I'm like, no, it didn't work out that way. So you really did need to learn from them. So that was really nice.
Wow. Well, I know that environment, those teachers, the clay, all of those differences inspired you and influenced your work there. Tell us a little bit about what you did while you were there that may have been different or influenced, aside from working with a different type of clay. I know you have some interesting insights to share on what you did create and bring back with you.
Sure. There were, when you're walking through the town, all you could see, almost every single person had teaware of some sort. So tea being a very, very long tradition there in China, you would just go through and, like, their tea sets looked completely different than what I was used to. They were so small, and I was like, that's only for like one person. And then you look at the cups and they're really tiny, and I was like, oh, theirs is so cute. But it was very personal. I was like, that was your teacup and that's somebody else's teacup. So when you would sit down to have tea, they would pour the water in there, and the hot water just constantly brought out more tea. So you could sit and have as many cups as you wanted.
Wow.
So that was exciting to see all the teaware. There were lots of Buddha statues everywhere. So from the tiny teapots to the 6-foot-tall Buddha statues, or whatever that the mold makers were turning out, and then the hand painters. We went to a big pot factory where the men work in tandem, where you could have 3, maybe 4 guys throwing one pot.
Wow.
And just a section of the pot. It was just really, really fascinating. Even their lamppost were sections of pots put together to make a street light post. So just walking through the town and seeing tons of porcelain everywhere was really inspiring. And everyone has a shop, it seems like. They would have a small little shop, and this is what they made. Like, this is a spoon maker. Go to the next shop. Oh, this person makes bowls. And they would have 3 or 4 different types of bowls that they would make. Go to the next one. Oh, this person makes just teacups, and that's all they make. And the porcelain could be so translucent that they would put lights on it, and they would carve into the actual cups, and you could see the delicate carving of a crane or bamboo or whatever it might be inside the cups, and it just glowed. It's just really beautiful to see the craftsmanship and the handiwork and all the different facets of what everyone learned how to do. It's just really inspiring.
And now we're getting to see you incorporate some of those techniques and elements that you learned there into your work. I know you were showing your coffee mug and how you're incorporating some blues. That is kind of, it looks very much like your typical the typical Mitch Kimball style, but how is that different? You know, how is this influencing your work?
Well, one thing that I noticed that when we went there, especially in the Big Pot Factory, they do blue and white painting that's there. So they use a lot of different types of cobalts. And so they will have a master painter that is painting these beautiful landscapes in just cobalt. So porcelain being very, very nice and white, they call it blue and white painting. So what do you leave white? What do you paint blue? And they have different types of brushes for different types of lines. One of the funniest brushes to use was called the chicken head brush, which is a brush that looks like a mop, and it just forms to a beautiful little point on the end. So it looks kind of like a little chicken head. So you squeeze it, and the more you squeeze and the way that you draw with it allows just the right amount of cobalt to come out on your painting.
Wow.
So it depends on what types of brush. Some brushes are giant fan brushes, and they're just sloppily putting things on, and it seems like that. But once it's fired, it's a beautiful landscape of rocks and trees. And you're like, how is that possible?
Right.
They're like, oh, they've just been doing it for years. I walked up on this one artisan. She was just painting away on these tall little pots, and I think I must have startled her when I walked up, because she turned around and she was still just painting away, you know, and it's like she just had done those same motions for so long that she knew exactly what she was doing, even though I interrupted her.
Wow.
So it's just fascinating to see what people do. So coming back here to Kentucky, you know, we're in the bluegrass state, and there's lots of blue going on, so it just seems natural for me to incorporate more blue into my work. So I'm starting to use some of those chicken head brush painting techniques to add a little bit of blue to some of my work.
Very cool. Can't wait to see more of that.
Thanks.
And I think one of the most exciting, obviously it has influenced you professionally in your work, but I think it's really also exciting to hear you talk about how this is influencing your teaching and informing your students and sharing, continuing to share this experience with the community, future creatives, just the community at large. So tell me a little bit about, or tell our viewers a little bit about some of those ways that you're incorporating this experience and passing it forward.
Well, one thing that my wife and I did, since we're both art teachers at McCracken, she's right next door to me. She teaches metalsmithing. I teach ceramics and art. So I had my ceramic students make cups. I'm like, we'll make some teaware sets, and we'll have a tea ceremony. And then Miss Stamper was like, well, what if my students made the spoons for your students, so we could work together in a collaboration? It's like, oh, that sounds amazing. I'll have my students make a cup for your students too, and we can have an exchange, and we could sit down and have those conversations and critique each other's works. So that was really fun. So her students immediately started making spoons, and she started going over like, well, what should a spoon look like? Is it supposed to match your cup? Do you know what your cup's going to look like? So there was like a connection that was going to happen. And my students started making cups, so it's like, well, if you made a cup, what would be its companion? Would they look similar? You know, and I wondered if those students would pick up my motto of like, no two alike. So we talked about the philosophy of wabi-sabi and how the imperfections make things more perfect, and there is no perfect. So they love the idea that there was no way to fail. So we got together, had our wonderful tea party, and students exchanged, and they gave critiques from their partners, and it was a wonderful time. I brought back some tea from China, and so they got to sample some of the tea that was 15-year-old. It's called pu'er tea. And so I showed them, this is how you prepare it, and this is the size of teapots and things it would make. And I showed them like, well, these are American-sized teapots that we would make, or we would call them coffee pots probably. And so the students just really enjoyed trying something different. And it was fun. It's probably something we'll continue doing in class.
And that'll be so memorable for them in the future, and to have that connection to what's happening on the other side of the world, that's invaluable for your students. And I know that you have plans to potentially deepen that connection with some more connection to China and some of the educators and people that you met there.
That's true. When I got to go there, one of the things I was looking for was meeting other local potters. And it worked out great. So when we arrived, all the local potters were setting up right outside of, you know, where my apartment was. So I got to go through and look at their work, and it was just fascinating to see the different ways that all the potters were. And this particular festival was only set aside for 30-year-olds and younger. So it was all the new young generation of potters coming up, and they were all trying to make their mark on the world on, this is what I like to do. It's not something that they would normally be doing. It's like, this is what I like to do. So it was cool to see their passion. And so I've met 2 potters at that festival that I got to fire with. So that was really exciting to see their work, like, oh, I really love your work. I'd love to come fire with you. It's like, well, I'm firing this weekend if you want to get together. And so you hurry and bustle, make some things, and then make it happen. And it was fun to fire with other folks in the same similar way that I would fire at home. Similar kiln, similar type of environment, and just working on the outcome. What would the glaze look like? And it's just exciting to see what other folks do and then to work with them.
It is, and it's so exciting to see what you do, and I hope that our viewers have gotten to know Mitch Kimball a little bit better today and understanding how these creative cities connections can benefit not only individual artists, but our community at large, and that education and how these connections continue to have a ripple effect through the community. So we really appreciate you sharing today and look forward to our viewers getting out, getting connected with S&M Studios, and staying tuned for what you all have ahead.
Cool. I certainly appreciate it, Laura. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you for watching today. Like we said, please check out Mitch's work online, S&M Studios, and check out his Creative Cities story on our website, on the Paducah.travel blog. He shares some photos and insights on his experience in Jingdezhen and how he'll continue to make those part of our culture and our fabric here in Paducah. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time.
1, 2, 1, 2, go. Hello, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Hello, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da.